Going to welcome everybody to Networking for Life, Relationship Building for Career Success, part of the kickoff for Ellis Chase's webinar series that's going to be everything about kickstarting your career for career transition, including, very importantly, the topic of social intelligence, which will be woven throughout the series. So Ellis has been consulting in this space for many, many years. I'm not going to tell you how many because you'll think he's a dinosaur. But the place that he loves to do this most is with graduate schools of business, and he has worked with several, including Cornell for the last 5 years. And our relationship with Ellis became even more formalized last fall, and he is working to support Johnson alumni as well as current EMBAs. So he speaks as a guest frequently at universities and corporations and also coaches privately. So we are going to be posting this recording after the fact. So I'm not exactly sure when that will happen, but it will be probably within a few days, if not even tomorrow. So this is Liz Kolodny speaking. I'm on the career development team, as probably many of you are aware. And I am based down in Metro New York along with Ellis Chase. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn the controls over to Ellis, but I do want to mention, if you guys have questions, it's Ellis's preference to take them during the presentation, and you can use your chat box to forward questions, and I will convey them to Ellis. So you don't have to hold them till the very end of the presentation. Okay, so with that, Ellis, take it away, Networking for Life.
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you could make it tonight. We're doing a little experiment this year. In the past, and every other evening program I've ever done with MBAs, it used to be 7, and I just thought, relax a little. Come home from work if you're working or whatever you're doing during the day, and let's do it a little bit later. So we'll see how this works out in the 6 weeks that we're going to be doing this. This particular subject drives everybody nuts. I'm just going to tell you this right now. So I'm going to start off with what it's not, what networking is not. Networking is indirect. It is not direct. It is not, hi, do you know of any openings? Hi, do you have any leads? Hi, who do you know who works in such and such? It's never cornering people. It's not the idea of making people uncomfortable, which is what most people think networking does, and it does. It's the art of the indirect market. The whole notion of, I'm asking you for something, but I'm not going to make you uncomfortable, and I'm not going to make you do a lot of the work. I'm going to do a lot of the work. I'm going to be prepared. I'm going to have questions prepared, and I have certain goals. And we're going to go through some metrics later on about how do you measure whether a networking meeting or an information meeting, whatever you want to call it, whatever euphemism you want to use, how does it work? Are you doing it right? So I have a couple of metrics we're going to talk about. And the most important topic of all is, aside from understanding what it really means and how you really do it, it's really all about language, a lot of language. For example, I'm going to say later on, with a ridiculous image, I'm going to say, never say the word networking when you're doing it. Because that's a way of saying to somebody, hey, I want to exploit you, which is not a good thing to do. And the word is taken on such a negative connotation that you don't want to use it. So we come up with language and words like, my favorite is doing a due diligence or doing market research. So when I say we're going to be talking about language a lot, you're going to see a lot of language on the screen, which, as every presenter knows, if you've ever taken a basic presentations class, you don't read the screen to everybody. All of the people in the room, in our virtual room, know how to read, I assume. So I'm not going to do that to you. I promise I'm not going to do that to you. So let's take a look at the agenda. It's three set things. First is we're talking about the numbers a little bit, which I think, you know, when you talk about numbers and what works the best in any kind of a career transition, you have to think about, I'm going to do the thing that works the most. And obviously, you know what the answer is. That was not even a spoiler. You also have to start to think, and this is where the social intelligence aspect comes into here, what's going on the other side of the desk? And of course, the major objective of our evening is the entire process of networking. So we have a fairly ambitious agenda. I've done a class like this, I'd say, I don't know, somewhere around the vicinity of 25 years or thereabouts. And this is the most recent incarnation where I made a decision that the one question that people in my private practice and in EMBA classes and alum classes or webinars or live presentations are always asking me is, how do you say that? So that is where you're going to see a kind of an unusual emphasis rather than some of the other things you might have expected tonight. So the stats. I'm presenting this in a different way. I usually just present it in, okay, here's the US Department of Labor Bureau of Statistics numbers, what works the best. And then I start researching every other survey. The numbers are all over the place these days. A lot of people don't know what to make of the social media numbers. They don't know what to make of the posting numbers and all, you know, and Indeed.com numbers. To me, I've been in this business for a really long time. I haven't seen anything change. If there is any kind of a change in what works the best, I'm going to say that ads, postings have increased slightly from the 6 or 7% of market penetration that it used to be to maybe 9 or 10 now because of the various means and ways. For example, if you go on the alumni website or you're looking through JConnect or you're looking at Cornell's postings, those are always, in every business school I've been affiliated with, well, you'll find the same thing, that those numbers, that so those postings are real. And they're curated and they're free for the advertiser. So it's, for some reason, they work better than anything on Indeed.com. They're more effective. They're not going to screw around. They have a specific audience. That's the specific audience they're after. So chances are that those are probably the most effective postings that I have encountered. These days, I'm also finding out that LinkedIn has gotten way more effective that way, but does it really account for huge numbers? So I want you to look at what I'm going to do right now. Now, I want you to look at the proportions here. Are you getting the message? I used to run a pie chart, and I think I'm using it in one of the subsequent 5 webinars, and the pie chart will show networking and relationship building as something like 80%, 81% of all jobs are achieved through relationship building, which is absolutely the truth. My big point in this little graph here, this proportional graph, is to show you where human resources sits on the list. I couldn't make it small enough because we wouldn't have been able to see it, but it's less than 1% of market penetration. So when anybody walks into my office, let's say, or visits, or I meet them on the phone via Cornell alum or at an EMBA event out at Palisades, and they ask me a question about, well, they'll say, I've sent out 400 resumes and I haven't gotten anything. Well, yeah, there's a good reason. Aside from deforestation, the reason is that technique doesn't work. Having been one of those staffing people in a giant corporation, the giant bank that bears my family name, no connection, but having been there for a number of years, nobody ever got a job by just randomly sending out resumes, but I don't know why people keep on doing it. It's the dumbest job search technique there is. So I've given you 6 categories here. One of them does not apply to nearly everybody I've ever met in a business school, which is civil service, but it does account for 5% of the total job market. So I have to include it in there, but it ain't gonna be anyone around here. So I wanna define some of these, so you can see what I mean when I'm talking about relationships and when I'm talking about social media. Social media only means LinkedIn. Please, notice I wrote in the parentheses about notice what's missing. We're not using Facebook. There are certain, aside from the fact that Facebook creeps me out and always has, aside from that fact, there are only a few professions that get any true activity out of it, and they're usually advertising related professions and some marketing areas there. But LinkedIn is really the name of the game here. Job boards. Back in the day, newspapers meant something, and the New York Times ads meant something. But I haven't, since Monster devoured it. I don't know if anybody ever even looks at them anymore. Executive recruiters are a terrible means for job search, especially for those of us in the virtual room who are EMBAs. EMBAs are primarily people who are looking to make fairly radical changes. I've been working with EMBAs forever. And aside from being energy junkies, EMBAs tend to be looking at something radical. Executive search people are not interested in changers. They're not interested in any kind of change. They want people who are moving up in the vertical. They want people who want to continue doing the same thing they've been doing all along, but at a higher level. So I don't love this technique. The numbers are, if you attend one of our further webinars, the numbers are going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 6% of total market penetration. This one is the 5% one. I don't want to talk about it. And this one, I got my geometric sign wrong. It should be less than 1%, not greater than. But it's less than 1% probability for success. It is such a dumb way to look for a job. And there you have it. That's the reason that we're making a federal case out of networking and relationships. Big letters, 80%. I've seen it as high as 85%, as small as 70%. And where the things overlap each other. So the second topic that I had on our agenda, the other side of the desk. If you think that sending resumes or sending lots of blind letters to people is going to get you somewhere, think about this image. Think about the piles and piles of, usually I couldn't find a great graphic that was just looked like resumes, so I just threw paper on it. The whole notion of that you're going to get noticed. I'm telling you, I was in staffing. I ran technology staffing for what used to be called the Chase Manhattan Bank. And I must have gotten 500 unsolicited resumes a week, every week. A friend of mine who was a consultant with me at another business school did it at Bayer, and she said, well, I got 1,000 a week. They must have wanted to work for us. I said, yeah, you went under, we didn't. So what do we have to say about that? She said, she really claimed that she got about 1,000 or 1,500 a week at Bayer. My take is that this is why you're not going to get a whole lot of action through ads. And there are lots of other reasons, but mostly chances are that you're not going to even get looked at. That's the other side of the desk. That's what you're sending the paper to. That's what you're even sending decent targeted mail to, which is a reasonable technique if it's done right. We're not going to talk about that tonight, but I'm just saying it. There is some reason to it. Philosophy, that's me. That's I'm the second person there, and I put myself with all these other Greek guys. And I'm going to give you 3 philosophies of networking. First is a definition of networking. And this is, if you get this, you're going to completely understand what networking is. It is the ability to build relationships or rebuild old relationships over a period of time. That is the crucial clause of the sentence, over a period of time, so that when people hear of situations that might be appropriate, you're on their mind. Because if it's going to be a I'm going to use an old expression here, and I hope I don't offend, but if it's going to be a wham bam, thank you ma'am approach to job search, which is I have a spectacular 45-minute networking meeting and I have 7 of them, and all I got to do is sit back by my desk and I'm going to wait for the phone to ring. No, this is over a period of time, and there is some positive reinforcement that's got to happen. So, you know how earlier I called it indirect marketing? Now I'm going to call it sophisticated sales. They're related. But there's a really sophisticated salesperson, and I'm sure we have a couple in the virtual room tonight. When you meet somebody, is the first thing out of your mouth, would you like to buy some of my widgets? No, you're into building the relationship first, and building and finding out what the need is and do some consultative selling. That's what networking really is. So there's your definition. 2, second philosophy, maturity is the ability to delay gratification. I am quoting a psychoanalytic thinker and writer whose name was Bruno Bettelheim. I have to tell you the truth about that quote. Let me say it again. It's maturity is the ability to delay gratification. He was really writing about adolescent sexuality. Think about it. And I always thought it applied to career transition networking. I thought it was just great because it isn't how many people I've seen and what a spectacular impression I made and bam, I'm going to get the call. It's how am I working the network? And we're going to get into a lot of that later on. How am I keeping people warm? The third philosophy is don't corner people. And when I mean don't corner people, it's if you think that hitting somebody with a great 2-minute pitch at, let's say, an alum function that you go to, or you're doing some professional association, and people hate going to those things because they're afraid they're going to get cornered. And you don't want people to run away from you because they know you're on search, you're in transition, and they're going to run away from you because you're going to ask them for something. Well, people that we talk to, that Liz and I talk to in this process, are not going to be the people who are going to be avoided. They're going to be the people who are welcomed, who have something to bring to the table, and with whom there is something reciprocal about this relationship. And it's hard for people to believe that because they always think, oh, damn, it's poor little me, hat in hand, and I'm going out there and I'm asking people for help. No, it's not. It is a business transaction. Smart business people, please pay attention to what I'm about to say because it's psychologically critical. Smart business people will want to meet with you. But you notice I put a proviso on that. Smart business people will want to meet with you. Business is about relationships. Successful people in business have lots of good relationships. They manage up, they manage to the side, they manage down, but they manage, and they're managing relationships. There's no difference between that and networking. So the whole notion of being welcomed and thinking that I have just as much to give this person as they have to me. So I'm going to tell you a story right now. This is the time for my big story. I have learned over the years that it always goes 2 ways if you do it right. And that's where people have so much difficulty with this. They always think that you're the one who's needy. They're not. And I say, yes, they are, if they're a smart business person. A few years ago, many years ago, it was about 18 years ago, I was doing some work at another business school, the one that's on 116th Street in Manhattan. And I was doing a lot of guest speaking there. And it evolved into a consulting arrangement. And in the 3rd or 4th year, they hired a new director of my group. And I thought, damn, every time there's a new director, and we all know this, when there's a new boss, new manager, we all know this. that they're going to want to bring their own people, or they're going to want their own staff, or their ego can't stand the previous regime's people being there. We all know this drill. And better managers get past that. Bad ones don't. This guy comes in. He has an MBA from that particular school. He has a PhD in clinical psychology. He did some work in iBanking. He also did some work in the film industry. He had a really interesting background, very, very nice guy. And for some reason, he increased my responsibility, put me on retainer. I didn't understand it. So I said to him one day, why have you been so nice? You have a million friends from this place. Why didn't you bring them in? He said, you don't remember me, do you? And I said, why should I? And he said, seriously, you do not remember me. You did one of the most terrific networking meetings I've ever had. And I said, really? When? I don't remember sitting down with you. I remember seeing you. He said, no, it was a phone call. The dean asked you to see me. I said, okay. You still made no impression on me because I don't remember this at all. And he said, you spent an hour and a half on the phone with me. I said, I'm really sorry. I just don't remember this. And he said, I sent you a bottle of wine after. Yes, I remember you. It takes certain triggers to create. And I'm not suggesting to anybody here that you send gifts after a networking meeting. He just was so grateful for the time and that I helped him sort something out. Now, I have always used this story to prove the point that he came to me. Okay, he came with the endorsement of the dean, and that helped. But he came to me. I was the one who apparently didn't have anything to gain from it except to get the dean to like me more or whatever. He had everything to gain. He was the networker. But my belief is that it always comes around, or in general, it comes around. I wouldn't say every instance, but it did come around. It paid off in the most significant way in my career on so many levels for a 15-year consulting gig. And it was a terrific gig. It was a peak gig for me. It's not going to be as good as the one at Cornell, but it was terrific at its time. That's how it goes both ways. I got something out of doing a favor for somebody. I got something out of being the person who was the guru or the source of information at that particular moment. That's what I mean about this being two ways. And that's why I think it's really critical to understand that working the relationships takes some time. We're going to get into it later. I said this already. I hope to hell that this group is culturally aware and understands what this image is. If you don't, write me an email later and I'll tell you. I think it's perfect. The word networking it's a bad word. Remember, you want to use euphemisms when you're talking to people or approaching people or writing to alums who I think are the single best resource you have and one of the most important reasons why you went to business school. No doubt about it. You have 19,000 alums at Johnson. 19,000 of your dearest, closest friends, even though you've not met half of them, they're going to be more receptive to a networking approach. But even with them, you're going to say due diligence, market research, want to find out more about my potential markets. I'm curious to know what people who are doing this think about my credentials as a match for this. All the stuff you like to ask when you're networking. But don't say it when you're doing it. Here you can do it. When you're talking to me or Liz, you can do it. You can do it in a classroom, when we're talking about it. But out there, no. So let's get started. First thing you do, triage. I call this triage. I got to come up with a good hospital image for this. The ABC list. When you're starting to build a network, whether it be for internal purposes, for external, for whatever reason, anything to do with a career transition, your A list is all the people that you know, and here's the critical part, that you're comfortable with, that you find are a level or two above you from where you want to be. But the critical thing is you're comfortable. A-list, in your target area, a level or two above where you want to be. B-list, all of the same, except for one critical variable, not so comfortable. When I'm talking with individual alums from Cornell, this is the subject that comes up the most. Like, I haven't seen this person in 10 years, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'm going to approach this person. Or I met this very C-suite person at one conference. He's not going to remember me, but I want to write. I feel awkward about it. How can I do that? So that's the B list. The C list is everyone who you know or know of who can get you to the B's and the A's. Somebody who cuts your hair, your dentist, your alumni list, your alumni database, which, by the way, we don't use an alumni database anymore. You don't use Cornell's. You do it through LinkedIn. It's much easier, and it's current, and it's up to date. I mean, who's not going to be on LinkedIn unless you're so out of it that you have no clue that it exists, or you've retired and you don't care, or you're feeling so comfortable with your life and your career that it doesn't make any difference. You don't see the value of it. So that's a C list. I'm going to contend right now, I'm going to shock you all by saying between the three lists, if you have a total of 5 people, you're going to be fine. Your whole search is made. Even if 3 of them bomb out on you, it's going to be made. Because all you need is 2 of them to come up with a good idea, maybe a good recruiter they've used, and 3 new people to contact, all of a sudden it's blooming, even if you've only gotten lucky with 2 of them. Okay? So don't put the pressure on that every single meeting you have has to yield the things that we're going to use as metrics a little bit later on. So with every networking process, this is where we get into positive reinforcement. You are going to make a decision here. And the decision is the following. The decision is, do I call first or do I write first? By the way, I write letter in there, not because I'm so hopelessly out of date with things. It's that I learned something. I was doing a Recruiters Day event about 10 years ago, and I met a woman there who had flown in from Redmond, Washington. She was the head of recruiting at Microsoft. And she said, tell some of your students, not all of them, tell a few of your students that writing a letter would get a lot of attention rather than just be a stack of emails. And I just started to laugh, and I said, okay, I could handle this from any other company, but from Microsoft? She said, yes, that's the point. It's going to get a lot of attention. So that's why I always include it in there. So you have to make a decision. Am I going to phone first or am I going to write first? My recommendation is that you're going to write first. I don't like blindsiding unless you are a person who gives great phone. And the fact of the matter is, with the phone comes people who are absolutely fearless salespeople who are comfortable with it. I don't like to blindside people, but there are people who can be so unbelievably charming and terrific, cold calling and being great at it. Be my guest if you think you can do it. But I'm going to recommend number 2 should be the first way, and then the phone is the follow-up. Don't worry, I'm going to give you some language in a couple of minutes. Meeting. We're going to talk about how to structure the meeting. It is not just sitting there and chatting and hoping interesting things coming up. We structure it, we're prepared, we're ready for it. Thank you. The part that everybody screws up on every imaginable level because you think that it's a courtesy, thank you for your time, I know how busy you are. Oh, God, give me a break on that. A thank you is a marketing email. It's a repetition of things you talked about, maybe something you forgot to talk about, maybe something that adds to the conversation. That's what a thank you is. And in addition, you're also going to do the implied quid pro quo or the stated quid pro quo, which is, if there's anything I can do to return the favor, please do not hesitate to call on me. Or if they mention something they were interested in and you find an article on it, include it, use it. And guess what? Number 5, the most important part of networking by far. This is what recruiters call, because I was a corporate recruiter, we call it keeping them warm so they can't forget you. Remember what the definition of networking was? It was over a period of time. People need to remember you because then they hear about this unbelievable job down the hall and they say, who was that woman I talked to? She was really terrific at supply chain and I can't remember. Oh yeah. Let me look at my calendar. I know who she was. I can picture her now. This is the whole point of the follow-ups. We're going to get into what you're going to do to follow up without being obnoxious about it. So, an example of an approach. So this is, a little courtesy at the beginning. Let's say you saw an article about the person, so you quote it, or you were referred by somebody else. Get that referral source up front. Then it's credential. Then it's why you're calling. Now, I want you to notice something about the close here. It's never, I look forward to hearing from you. Never. You never, ever give them the power. You always are the proactive person. You are not the reactive person. If you're going to be successful in any kind of a transition, in my world, it's going to be proactive. It ain't going to be reactive. So look at the last paragraph. It's not, I look forward to hearing from you, ever. Or it's not people who come into my private practice and say to me, I've written 85 approach emails and no one's gotten back to me. And I go, oh man, she's really lost, because that's not how it works. It's what I do to follow up. So is there a time you may have available for a brief meeting? Or is there somebody in your organization? That's if you're writing to a really senior person. But look at that next sentence there. I'll contact you next week to see if we can arrange. See that? I will follow up, not you. Sometimes they might. But it's on you. Everything is on you. If you're going to be waiting for people to write back to you or get back to you from a LinkedIn approach or however you're doing this, if you're going to wait, you're going to be sorely unhappy because you're being too passive. You're waiting for everybody else to do the work. You need to do the work. That's why I threw this email in there. Now, more language. What happens? The weirdest thing is, let's talk about the gatekeeper. Anybody in our room tonight knows this really, really well. They know that building relationships with gatekeeper is a spectacular way to get on someone's calendar. So here's some language for you. Then he or she says back to you, you're looking for a job, right? No. It's not. No, it's not that. It's about some personal market research. Yeah, use the euphemism there. And I'm following up on a communication she and I already had. Now think about that. I didn't say that it was a two-way correspondence. I just said I wrote an approach email, right? But you're not saying that to the gatekeeper. It's about a correspondence we've had and I'm following up. That's it. But, weirder things have happened. And I will tell you, this happened to me in my very first year at the Chase Manhattan Bank. I was given the assignment because I was a new kid on the block. And I was given the assignment of inviting all of the C-suite of that entire place to some function or other. I can't even remember what it was. And the first person on my list was DR himself, David Rockefeller. And I was supposed to call him and invite him. So I'm thinking, it'll be 18 layers till I get him. And he answered the phone. He always answered his phone. And fortunately, he had a sense of humor because I'm sitting there stuttering like, whoa, I'm talking to David Rockefeller. And this is my first week working in this place. Whoa. And fortunately, he said right back to me, he said, what did you say your name was? And I said, Ellis Chase. He said, seriously? Really? There's someone who works here with the name Chase? I said, well, there are 3. I looked through the directory the first day I was here. I was really curious. He said, okay, then I'm going to put you on the grill here and I'm going to ask you, do you know what the origin of the name Chase Manhattan Bank is? And you know what? I knew. He was so impressed. It was the Chase National Bank, named after Salmon P. Chase, who was Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of the Treasury, and the Manhattan Water Company. It was a merger in 1950. Anybody here know that? I loved knowing that. I just thought it was so cool. And he had a real sense of humor. He said, "Sure, I'll come. Let me give you the phone number of my assistant." I actually called his private line and I didn't know. So, and he came. It was pretty cool. Here's some language for you in there. And if you do get the person, sometimes I'm a big believer in the apology email, the apology phone call. It's showing that you respect the other person's time. So this is why language is so important here. Very sorry to intrude on your time, but I was hoping that we might be able to set a time to meet. You got the idea, right? Language, language, language. And I'm going to repeat what Liz said at the very, very beginning of tonight for those who came a little later. That we are posting these. Well, for MBAs, it'll be on JConnect. For alums, it'll be on the alumni webpage. So it should be within a week or so. I'll check that out tomorrow, okay, and make sure that it does happen. And if you don't see it, let us know. We're not shy. Okay, now we're into the heavy duty part. This is the follow-up email. Language again. We're back to language. And what you're going to do here is you first start by thanking. You were generous. I appreciate it. Then I would like to ask you to follow through on your offers to introduce me to, and then maybe a reference to what you were talking about. Maybe it's, wow, I wish I had told this person. I had told Saul. I hope some of you understand the references in this particular email. That I want to discuss something else that I forgot to tell you. And maybe it may be personal, maybe it's about business. And there's that quid pro quo. Please do not hesitate to call on me if there's anything I could do to return the favor. Got it? Language, language. So how do we follow up after the thank you? So far, we've tried to get hold of this person maybe 4 times. Believe me, I never stop. We're going to talk about that too. We've seen the person, we've written a follow-up. So maybe our name has been in front of this person 5 times already. So let's talk about it. This is the follow-up email that we just talked about. This is 2 weeks later. The person may have referred you to somebody. Well, let them know that you saw the person. Not because you're just such a nice human being, and you are, but not just because. It's mainly because you want an excuse to get your name and remind this person of your existence. So that's great. So let them know that the referral worked out well. This is classic sales technique. This is, seeing an article. We all get them from people. We all don't read them, but it's okay. You find something that's great, you saw in the journal, and you're sending it to the person 5 weeks later. Look how long we're trying to keep this relationship going. 8 weeks. This time we're going to have to say, we hope you remember me. And I was the guy who. And I've been talking with so-and-so, and I remember that you knew something about them. Could I call you for a max of 2 minutes to ask you a question about the organization? So these are 4 ways of doing it. Everybody's always asking me, how do I not be obnoxious? Well, these are reasonable business follow-ups. So maybe this means that you'll have a total of 7 or 8 different times when your name's been in front of people. We want to make it tough for everyone to not forget you. I don't know if that sentence made any sense at all, so I take it back. We want people to remember you. Definitely want people to remember you. So, when are we obnoxious? You know what? When you're out there and you're on the market, you're going to be a little bit more sensitive and a little bit more vulnerable than you normally are in real life. I know this is true. You're going to be a little squeamish about pushing harder. My suggestion is you got to move past that, and you got to go a level or 2 more than you normally would. push yourself to do that fifth time, that fifth contact, and say, okay, now it's enough. Either I'm going to hear back from this person at some point or not, or maybe I'll do it in 2 months, whatever. I just don't want us to completely cross from the white swan to the black swan. Don't want to do that. Okay. Now our first metric. Okay, you ready? We have 3 purposes in every meeting. I contend that if you have one of these successful in the meeting, you've had a good networking meeting. If you've had 2, you've had a great networking meeting. 3, you have a mentor. So let's talk about each of these, because this is probably one of the 2 most important slides that we're going to have in the deck, okay? The first objective is what we've been talking about all along. How do we keep this relationship and this memory going so we know what that's all about? We can't force chemistry. So not every meeting is going to be great. And I could, if I had the time tonight, I could bore you to tears. No, actually, I could get a couple of laughs out of some really horrific meetings that I've had where people were just flat out nasty or insulting. Or there was one woman, this is my favorite of all time, who I was meeting in Stamford. I live in New York City, and I was meeting her in Stamford at 7:30 in the morning, which means a 45-minute drive. And she stood me up. She never called. So I called her and I said, maybe we missed up the meeting. And she said, oh, no, my bad. Like that. Like she just dismissed it. We made a second meeting and she stood me up a second time. What she forgot was that her boss was the person who referred me, her boss being one of the founders of the largest consulting firm of its type in the world. And I called him and I said, look, I did what you told me to do, but she stood me up twice. I ended up working for the company. I ended up being a managing director there. And she never could understand why I never spoke with her at any staff meeting, at any regional meeting. I mean, this is what goes around comes around also. And she never apologized. She never acknowledged this. I hate to tell you all this, but it's not uncommon. You're going to encounter some bad behavior. You may not be as vengeful as I was in this particular case, but it's going to happen. If you know it, you're going to be able to handle all this very well. So we know about number 1. Number 2 is the biggie, information and advice. Here's how you do a networking meeting, period. You prepare questions. Information questions are business questions that reflect that you've done your homework, that you know something about them, you know something about the industry. Even if it's a fairly radical change, you ask something that reflects that you've done the homework. I said it twice because I want to make a big deal about it. I recently read that you were planning an expansion in the Northeast Corridor. I'm curious about how you're going to go up against X company and Y company who have a dominant market share there. That's going to be tough to break. Well, right away, you're showing, hey, I know something, and I'm asking you a question. This is excellent. So it's an information question. The ones you really want to get to are the advice questions. The advice questions are, my favorite one is, when you're looking for somebody in your group, what do you look for when you hire? How great a question is that? Think about it. If you get enough people to answer that question, you can tailor your pitch, you can tailor your whole search, the whole thing, to a collection of 6 or 7 answers that you got to that question, and present yourself as exactly the candidate that most people want. Another advice question. What would be your perception of my market today based on what I told you about myself? Great market question. That's what I mean by advice. Or I'm going to give you a general question to ask, which is among my favorite, which is, could you tell me, I'm very curious to know how you got to this point. Now, the reason that question is so spectacular is because most people love being asked about themselves, and they're going to tell you. And from your point of view, you're making them comfortable, but you're also possibly getting some ideas that you didn't have before when you're hearing about the byways and highways of somebody else's career. And last but not least, there are two ways of asking for other people to talk to. Two ways. The first way is the general open-ended way, which is, could you think of anybody it might be worth my while to talk to, just like we're talking? That's okay, but it's not great, because it's like, you know, when people ask you questions like that and you just can't think of anybody at that moment. If they say, yes, let me think about it, well, it gives you another excuse to call them and ask. That's okay. I have a better way. I would have printed out a list of 25 organizations in the space that you're looking at. And if it's relevant, their company should be on it. Don't insult them. And you show the list to that person, and that person says, oh, now here's where ego comes in again. Oh, I know somebody there who is the COO, and I used to work with her. As a matter of fact, we're still in touch. So, wow, they're all of a sudden stuck. They're going to have to introduce you, and you'll say immediately, could you introduce me, or would it be okay if I called that person using your name? I love that technique. Once I had it tried out on me, because I was in a period of my career where I was an MD of this consulting company, and it was also very visible in my professional association. So I was very popular for about a 3-year period. And I got a lot of people approaching me all the time. And one of them sat down in my office and tried this on me. And I said, oh, nice technique. I love that. And I still fell for it. The ego still worked. And I ended up saying, oh, I used to sit next to her at this company years ago. She's an old friend. It gives me an excuse to call her. I'm going to set something up for you. You know, it's a great ego tactic. So, and it's also a memory jogger. Now, metrics for success. I'm going to repeat myself here. One of these in a meeting means you've had a successful meeting. 2 of them, great meeting. 3 of them, mentor. Okay? That's an important function. Now, here's the other metric. The reference here is that I have stage. It's so oblique and so ridiculous, but I just like the picture from Hamilton. So, how do you judge your network? Now, we know how to judge the meeting because we just did this. Judging your network. I have had people come into my office and say, I have met with 50 people in the past year, and I still have not heard about an opening. And right away, I know what's wrong with their search. I know exactly what's wrong. And I would say every time, tell me about 5 people that you met with. And what happens is that they've been meeting with nothing but what I call stage 1 people. Stage 1 people are peers. Peers are great for information gathering. Peers are great for penetrating an organization. Peers are great to give you a good feeling about what's going on there. Peers are not great for hiring or introducing you to hiring managers. You want to get to the stage 2, stage 3 people more than anything. Stage 2 could be a bridge between the peer and the decision maker, or they could be decision makers themselves, a level above you maybe. Stage 3s are people who are decision makers. So how do we rate the search? We rate it easily. How many 2s and 3s am I seeing? The person who says I've met 50 people, that means they saw 50 ones. Ones aren't going to do it. Only good for the beginning. Only good for preliminary research. So we now have 2 metrics for figuring out how well am I doing on this. Now, most people think that you have to be this great extrovert to go out. Now, I've had some students in some EMBA classes in my prior university affiliation. There were some people there who could walk down the street and make 80 friends by the end of the block. All of us think that we wish we could be like that because then we'd build networks all over the place. But most of us don't. And especially very introverted people or people who come from a different culture where self-promotion isn't necessarily the easiest thing in the world. Well, it's good to be an extrovert in this particular thing, but it's not necessary. And I certainly wouldn't want to be this guy. This was pre his presidential exposure, if anybody knows what I'm referring to. But still, there's a lot of not nice stuff about this guy. And the point being that you can learn all the language, you can learn the technique, you can understand it, you could be the world's leading introvert, and you could still be a great networker. Period. End of story.
Ellis,
yes,
it's Liz.
yes.
I'm just doing a time check. It's 10 before the hour. Okay.
And I'm exactly on schedule.
Great.
I'm a fast-talking New Yorker, you know, can't help myself. Networking in a social or professional setting. And now I'm going to ask the first, this is an important cultural question. I know that many of you know this movie, Animal House, but I would like to know if anybody here, you can write in the chat box and Liz will forward it to me, if anybody here knows what college the real story happened at. Does anybody know? Liz, are we getting anybody?
Dartmouth?
It is. Whoa, who said that?
We have a winner.
Who was that? I need to know. No? That's that. No one ever gets that. That's unbelievable. Because everybody.
That was Brianna Ford.
Hi, Brianna. How are you? So, wow. Wow, that's really great. My daughter is an alum, and so she showed us the building, which is a point of pride, because I know a lot of people think it was their school, because of course it was like that at their school. The only reason I'm bringing this into the discussion tonight is when you're in a social or professional setting, it is important to try not to corner people. People will resent it. What you can do, now I'm not going to say you're going to be at a place like Animal House. I'm talking about, let's say, an alum meeting or alum panel that you go to. It's okay to talk to somebody and briefly introduce yourself and ask them a little bit about themselves. Your number one objective in that context is get business cards. I always say, when you ever go to a group thing or a social thing, come back with 5 business cards. So you're going to say to somebody, oh, you do such and such? Wow, that's interesting to me. I'm thinking about that long range. Could I give you a call sometime? And you get to collect business cards and you've built your network. I always have to mention that. Okay. At the end of all 6 of our webinars, I'm going to have a different resource to pinpoint, and I like to start with my favorite one, which is my books. I tell this group this little fact about the red book. The blue book is very small. It's only about what we're talking about tonight. The first one is more comprehensive, although it's short. I designed it for 2 reasons. One was to undo the damage that the book, What Color Is Your Parachute, did. The biggest best-selling book in history of career management is What Color Is Your Parachute? And I have met very few people who have ever finished it. So I wrote mine to shut up and get to the point as fast as possibly could be. The other reason I wrote it, and I could never announce this at book signings or at any of the stuff that I've done on marketing, is that I really wrote it for MBAs, people who never have time to do anything and who really just want to learn how to do it. Let's get to it. Let's get to the point. Let's go. Like that. And even more specifically than MBAs, it was for EMBAs, who have less time than anybody to live or breathe or sleep. So that's why I'm very comfortable saying it in this virtual room. One last thing. We have 5 more of these, and I'm going to say, and if you have questions, start chatting them down or putting them in the chat book. I mean, jotting them down so that Liz can forward them to me in the last couple of minutes that we have. Next week is about social intelligence and politics and getting ahead in the organization. The following week is the marketing end of this whole career transition thing. You'll notice it's 3 items. That's all we're going to talk about are the 3 items. The most important one is the pitch. I could talk pitch for 10 hours. That's how important I think it is. And for anybody who knows me or has worked with me in this virtual room, you've heard me. I can rant and the whole thing. Social intelligence, again, it's not how smart you are. It's about your social intelligence. And I hope everybody's picking this up. They don't throw all of this, you know, the leadership stuff at you in business school for nothing. This is really all about relationship building. The 4th one on the list is self-evident, and it's always the most popular class, always. And then the last one we're going to do on April 18th, so we're doing 2 a week. The last one we're going to do is really everything that you really need to learn how to do in a career transition. So this is like really fast. I'm throwing a lot at the wall on that one. Liz, do we have any questions, or did I cover it so well?
Well, let's see. Oh, here's a question. Brianna, you're still on the line and you got the Dartmouth Award.
Yeah.
What's your view on reviving a connection that's gone stale, i.e. have not been consistent with follow-up or haven't connected beyond initial thank you correspondence?
And that is the question about the B list. That is the question about discomfort. Have a sense of humor about it. You'll say, I wish I didn't need an excuse to contact you. I've meant to, I've wanted to, and sometimes it just flies away. But I do have a reason and hope you understand. So have a sense of humor about it. Or it's been way too long and I actually have an excuse, which I hope I don't ever need, you know, like that. And that's the way you're going to handle it, Brianna, and everybody else. This subject, there are so many ways of approaching it, but I like that way. Liz, do you have any way that you think of, or is there anything you'd like to?
No, I think you pretty much covered this territory. But what I will say for people, current students who feel they need practice with this or extra support, don't forget that the coaching team is here to assist you, and we have our time trade links for that, or you can just reach out by email. Similarly, for alums, I would suggest you can probably email Ellis.
Same thing.
Yeah,
on the alumni website.
On the alumni website. Great. Well, so here we are. It's 2 minutes before the hour. Does anybody have any last minute? You can't go to sleep until you get this burning question answered questions. If not, we're going to actually end on time, and we will wish everybody a very happy and beautiful spring, and look forward to Ellis's hosting you on April 8th.
4th.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, April 4th for Proactive Career Management Getting Ahead.
I hope you all can come. It's in the middle of the day. We're mixing these up. And thank you for coming tonight. I hope
Thank you all for coming tonight.